Today we'll start with chapter 5, section 3. It talks about Egypt's empire, or the continuation of the empires. Previously, last week, we talked about the old age, or the old empire. Now, around 2200 BC, the old empire started to weaken, or the old kingdom started to weaken. The nobles started to struggle and fight with each other on power and rule. What happened is that a big family or the strongest family started ruling, which is the new family of pharaohs. Once they started ruling, they moved the capital from Memphis to Thebes. If you remember, Narmer made Memphis the capital in the Old Kingdom. So, as soon as this new family of pharaohs started ruling, the first change they did was that they moved the capital from Memphis to Thebes. And they started a new period known as the Middle Kingdom. Please note that you're going to do the same timeline that you did for the Old Kingdom, but for the Middle Kingdom. So to make it easier for you, you can start now drafting. As I explain orally, you can start writing a draft of a timeline about the accomplishments in the Middle Kingdom. So the first change or the first accomplishment that happened in the Middle Kingdom was that the pharaohs moved the capital from Memphis to Thebes. Now, during the Middle Kingdom, Egypt started conquering the rest of the areas around it and started to expand. They started expanding to the south, towards Nubia, and to the northeast, which is present day Syria. After the expansion, so the second thing is that they started conquering an expansion to the south and to the northeast. In these areas of expansion, they asked or they required a tribute. A tribute is like a tax, a payment from the people that they conquered. The difference is a tax is from the citizen. You pay tax for the Egyptian government. But a tribute would be if the Egyptian government asked for example, Syrian refugees to pay money for the Egyptian government as a payment for staying inside Egypt. This is called a tribute. But of course, Syrians are not conquered. This is just an example. So they started conquering the areas to the south and to the northeast. This area that they started conquering, they asked people who lived there to pay a tribute. The third improvement or the third accomplishment during the Middle Kingdom was that they increased the sizes of the farmlands, which increased later on the crop production. They also built more irrigation dams and channels in order to send water to these extra sizes of farmlands or to these huge farmlands. They constructed a canal between the Nile River and the Red Sea to be used for sea trade. So in water, we have three accomplishments or three minor accomplishments. One, it's the increase in the size of the farmland, which led to the increased crop production. Two, building more irrigation dams and channels. And three, constructing a canal between the Nile River and the Red Sea. This canal was used for sea trade. They used it for trading between the nearby areas. As for arts, the developments of the arts in the Middle Kingdom was that they started decorating the tombs with colorful paintings And the things that, or the stories that were written or drawn on the tombs were stories that happened with the person who died from the daily life. Also, sculptors started carving, hunting, fishing, and battle scenes onto the walls. The pharaohs stopped building pyramids and had their own tombs constructed by carving out limestone cliffs west of the Nile River. So instead of building a lot of tombs or pyramids for the pharaohs, for each pharaoh, they stopped building the pyramids and instead they started having their tombs bigger in size, carved on limestone cliffs, and later on, this became known as the Valley of the Kings. So it's an area where all of the cliffs that are facing the Nile River are made up of limestones and they are turned into tombs for the pharaohs instead of the pyramids. So in arts, we have three other accomplishments. Number one, they started painting colorful decorations and scenes from everyday life that happened with the person who died inside the tomb. Two, they started carving, hunting, fishing, and fighting scenes from the battles on the walls. Three, they stopped building the pyramids and instead they went into a valley where the cliffs faced the Nile River and the cliffs were made up of limestones and they started carving these limestones into tombs. And this later on was known as the Valley of the Kings. Now, during the 1600s, Egyptian nobles, they challenged the pharaohs. Nobles, remember, they were the second highest class. Now, civil war started in Egypt between the pharaohs and the nobles. So people were divided. During this time, people from Western Asia, known as the Hyksos, swept into Egypt. Egypt was no longer united, it was divided between the pharaohs and the nobles, and the rest of the Egyptian pyramid or the Egyptian people were divided also into halves. Half supported the pharaohs and half supported the nobles. So the country wasn't strong enough, and at the same time, people from Western Asia, known as the Hyksos, they attacked Egypt or swept into Egypt. When they attacked the Egyptians, their methods were unknown. They rode horses that drew carriages. These are the carriages. And they used sturdier weapons or tougher and stronger weapons made of iron and bronze. Egyptians did not know these metals yet. They only knew copper and stone. Iron and bronze were much stronger. And they did not know yet the use of the horses that they can pull carriages to make them faster instead of riding a horse. So the Hyksos used these technology methods, whether it's in the way they move or in the tools or the weapons that they fought them with, to control Egypt. They ruled Egypt for over 100 years, but they remained separate from the Egyptians. They lived in places that the Egyptians did not live in. Yes, they conquered them. Yes, they controlled them, but they did not destroy their houses. They did not take away the places that they lived in. Instead, they just settled in the areas that were empty or that were not settled by the ancient Egyptians. But they were stronger, so they conquered and they ruled them. Now, during this time that the Egyptians lived with the Hyksos, the Egyptians learned how to use this new technology. And around 1550 BC, the Egyptian prince Ahmus formed an army of the Egyptians after learning their technology and kicked or drove the Hyksos out. Ahmus began a new empire and began a new period of rule from 1550 BC to 1070 BC, which was known as the New Kingdom. So, this is the end of today's part where we talked about the Middle Kingdom. You need to go today, go back to the video and draw the timeline with the developments and accomplishments that happened to the Middle Kingdom. Now, there's an extra thing that you need to do. On the beginning of the timeline, you need to write down the beginning of the Middle Kingdom. What date is it? And at the end, you need to write the end of the Middle Kingdom, which is the start of the New Kingdom, which is 1550 BC. So you're going to draw a timeline that starts from here. You're going to start with the title as the Middle Kingdom. Okay? The date starts with 2200 BC. This is where the Old Kingdom started to decline and the New Kingdom started as the Middle Kingdom. The first accomplishment that happened was the movement of the capital from Memphis to Thebes. And then you continue with the rest of the accomplishments, which is the area conquered, the tribute that they started paying, the accomplishments and improvements that happened in farming and water, and then the accomplishments and developments that happened in the arts, the civil war that happened dividing Egypt, and thus the Hyksos invaded the Egyptians, the new technology that the Hyksos used, and then the beginning of the new kingdom, which started by the ruling of Ahmos. This is all what you have to write down in your timeline for today. Do you have any questions concerning today's session?
No, thank
No, thank you, Miss.
Okay, then don't forget to draw the timeline and send it, please. You have until tomorrow before the session starts, just like we did with the old timeline.